I hope you enjoyed the screening of HauntedWeen, either online or in the RPL Film Theatre. Um, this is a informal discussion about the film that I've engaged a another horror movie fan named Yasmina Ketita. Saying that right?
Yep, how's it going?
Yeah. Who has had an awesome podcast for a while called Witchfinger. They review tons of cult and horror films, and also writes for Rue Morgue magazine and does a video blog and reviewed HauntedWeen this month, which is why we got in touch and decided to do this conversation. Thank you, Yasmina, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
That's as well.
Yeah.
So, HauntedWeen, how did Rue Morgue approach you about doing this, or did you come up with? Did you want to do it?
So all of the movies that I covered for the Rewind Zone are my choice. They fully support me in anything that I choose. It's pretty fantastic. So I thought that for the vlog this month, because I also do a monthly blog, but the vlog is on the Rue Morgue TV channel on YouTube, and I figured that I should do a Halloween type of movie for this month, and I was going through the options and I thought to do HauntedWeen because compared to a lot of other Halloween 80s horror movies, this one isn't as talked about as much as the others. So yes, it was my choice, and I love that they let me choose whatever movies I want to talk about.
That's awesome. When did you first get? Did you get HauntedWeen recently?
Yeah,
A
so
bit
the
of
first time
background
I
on
watched
it and stuff.
Haunted Ween, yeah, I've got it on my shelf there. The first time I watched it was on YouTube, and then I got the tape about a year ago. It was actually a birthday present from my friend Chase in Virginia. So I am really happy that I do have the tape because I don't think it's very common.
No, it is not. I even when I started collecting, I didn't hear about it for a number of years, and then the sort of legend began to grow about this film. I never thought I'd see a copy. It was always one of those things that, like, the tapes that are so rare that you'll never see in your life,
Yeah,
unless somebody decides to be very nice and
yeah,
either sell it or give it to you.
yeah,
But that's awesome. I also like last year we did Spookies, which I chose because it was kind of an atypical, um, not exactly a Halloween movie, but kind of followed all the tropes without including the same kind of characters, which
yeah,
I also kind of feel is similar to HauntedWeen in a way, and also the a very singular effort of the creative teams and uh, that made these films.
hmm,
This is Doug Robertson's only feature film that he made, and
yeah,
uh, it when you like. I mean, you have people like you can think of so many directors who just like have churned out so many of these films,
hmm,
which are so often celebrated around Halloween month. Uh, but when you have a film like this, where it's singular effort, it makes you want to look at it deeper, and figure out
yeah,
why, what all went into this film. Why was it, this film? Um, I mean, I would have never known that that Doug Robertson was taught by the same person that John Carpenter was taught when he was in film school.
hmm,
With about maybe 10 years or so difference, but
hmm,
it's almost impossible to figure out why this film would reference Halloween. The 1979 film. Because you
yeah,
begin watching it and it it only barely seems to reference it. Um, so there's just so much more going on.
yeah.
But going back to so that's a little bit of a tangent, but so uh, so you recently just got this film. How long have you known about it for? When did
I'd
you first
say
hear about it?
maybe probably 3 years. I don't even know, how do we know about all of these movies that we love? Because we obsess with researching this stuff, you know what I mean? And it had always been a title that was on my want list. And then I'm a big fan of the Red Letter Media guys. And then I saw that they covered it for Best of the Worst. And then that made me realize that I was like, oh my God, it's on YouTube. I can actually watch the movie now. And then that led to me getting the tape for my birthday. But yeah, I'd say that I probably have heard of this movie about 3 years ago, and I'm surprised that I hadn't really heard about it before. But before that was, I like to say that meeting all of the people that I've met just through the VHS community on social media has also opened my eyes to a lot of movies that I'd not previously heard of, and also just doing a bunch of research on these types of movies based on, like the internet or even like in books like Analog Nightmares and Bleeding Skull and stuff like that. But yeah, over the past 3 years, I've been like even more infatuated with the saturation of so many like low budget 80s horror movies. So my want list keeps growing more and more. But yeah, I'd say about 3 years ago is when I first heard of HauntedWeen, and it's a great movie. I love it. And you were talking earlier about how this was his only movie, and that leads me to many questions as well. Like, why didn't he ever do more and continue into film? So that's something that I've always been curious about myself.
Absolutely. Watching the documentary, we learned a little bit more about what they thought might have come after. I heard them, and I'm going to drop a link to this on the event or whatever, so people out there can watch this. But they kind of thought that this would lead to more opportunities, ideally some kind of adventure film. I don't know if you caught that. That's a
I watched the documentary today.
Sorry, what?
I watched the documentary today.
But no, Doug never went on to make another film, and he, I believe he sells, he's a kind of medicine seller or something like that. I read. He says, I know how to sell things, so I stick to that. But such a funny guy. But talking about maybe how I came across this film, I heard about it maybe I don't know, maybe even a bit more than 10 years ago. But it was such just a legendary a film that I'd never even seen a physical copy. I never saw a physical copy on eBay. I never saw it in anybody's collection. But strangely, I'm not going to make this story too long, but I came across a physical copy of the film kind of in a weird way too, where a friend of mine in Saskatoon picked up an entire collection from the small town of Delisle, and it was this entire collection in this hermit's basement that had just been sitting there since the rental days, and he sends me these huge pictures of the collection, right? And I'm going through the titles. I'm opening
the pictures, making them
and
bigger.
then I'm what? Haunted Mother effing Ween? Are you kidding me? And I'm right away, I'm just dude, please reserve me the HauntedWeen. And he's yeah. And then I send him these titles, and then a month or two later, it's okay, I got all the collection, but it's too amazing. I can't part with any of it. And I was oh my God, I it's just this was my one chance to get HauntedWeen and whatever else. And so I'm just that, no, it is what it is. I understand. Months later, I get contacted by this guy again on a Sunday morning, and he's you want HauntedWeen? It's yours today for this price right now. And which was a good one. And I was oh yes, of course I do. So I buy the tape. A couple hours later, I hear that Doug Robertson has passed away. And I'm just so strangely weirded out by this that
Yeah.
out of all the time that I spent looking for this film, thinking I would never get it, and then like think that my last opportunity to ever find it would be gone. It's a strange sort of thing that came into my life as his life as he passed
Hmm.
on, and after that, I just knew that I had to screen my haunted tape of HauntedWeen.
Yeah, haunted tape.
Yeah, so so I mean, one thing I'm going to do in my intro is I'll make sure I dedicate it to Doug's memory. And
Hmm.
if Doug, if you had anything to do with this, this tape coming into my life for the screening, thank you, Doug.
Yes.
So moving on though, so interesting. They shot it in 1989, and it took 2 years to get to video stores after
Hmm.
that. So it was quite a. I mean, thinking of the absolute, labor and toil and that went into this film. I can imagine that the cast probably thought it was never going to come out.
Yeah.
Waiting that long. But sometimes films that take a long time to get distribution and VHS release. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of films from the 70s only got, wider releases in the 80s and 90s. But
Hmm.
a lot of people make fun of this film for the actors looking like they're from another time, that this is a small town and they haven't caught up with 90s fashion yet. But the fact is, it's 1989. I think
Yeah.
it's still on par with that, and that really has to be solidified. That this is not 1991. This is 1989, and it's
Yeah.
actually pretty on the edge for all of that, for all of the style and things that were happening then. I mean, new wave had long gone. The
Hmm.
soundtrack is so much more rocky, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the beat and the theme is so fast, and the use of synthesizer in there is just
Yeah.
mental. It's just
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but part of what I wanted to sort of talk about this and is kind of reminding people that this is still a movie of the 80s, but during a time in which the slasher genre was also at its lowest point of popularity. And often this film gets criticized because of these things which aren't really accurate, about them trying to tap into that, when I really feel that it's more parodying the slasher genre than trying to win over the hardcore audiences. I don't know. What do you did you get that sense of it when you were watching it?
Um, I don't really think so. I never really thought of it as a parody. And to be honest, I didn't know about these critiques that people had, saying that it was not following 80s fashion and this and that. And we've talked about this on the podcast a lot because we mainly do 80s horror,
Mm,
but sometimes we'll delve into the early 90s. And the 80s didn't fully stop in 1990.
yeah,
That's one thing that people have to remember is that because even in 1990 and 1991, the 80s were still kind of still fading out, you know what I mean?
mm,
But as far as the parody cheesy scale, I was just talking about this the other day. I was on another girl's show, Horror
yeah,
Movies and Beyond,
yeah,
and the topic was top, cheesy movies. And this says it's kind of a juxtaposition
mhm,
of feelings for me when it comes to this genre. And a lot of it is, it's 50-50. Some of it is based on the cheesiness factor, right?
mhm,
And the thing about 80s horror that people today will mock and make fun of, but admire and love at the same time.
yeah,
But on the other hand, um, a lot of these movies deal with very serious matters. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, like, being murdered is very serious. I talked about how Reanimator is a very cheesy movie. I mean, obviously, Barbara Crampton has a decapitated head pointing at her, you know, yoo-hoo. But, I mean, the tone is very serious. I mean, this is like a lesson, you know, this is what happens when you play God. So it's funny that you mentioned these critiques, because it actually surprises me, to be honest. Like, I don't really feel like it's a parody at all. I find that while I'm watching it, the sense that I get is that it's just Doug's attempt at a slasher. And in my opinion, he succeeded, because it's a very entertaining movie for many reasons, like for cheesiness, for gore. Like, the gore in this movie alone is wild.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I didn't really feel like it was vibing on a parody at all.
I feel like they try to set it up like that, though, but then they break it down. And especially you see that at the end. I feel like that, even though when you see the shot of like the half-burnt face of the killer, it's just, it couldn't be more serious and convincing. And then you see that what they pull off, and you just realize that, like, you're left with this question, like, how did they pull off that, like, exploding, burning car scene? How did they keep moving? Like,
I love that.
Risk their lives to do that scene.
I know, right? That actually, like, the best part in the documentary was how they explained how they did the van scene. And what was it? Like, I think it was the, maybe not the DP, but the guy that was, like, in charge of the van. Like, they stripped it down, they doused it in gasoline, and, like, they even, like, locked the steering wheel to prevent it from going down the hill, and then it went down it anyways. And but even, like, just how they described, like, even, like, the danger that it posed as well, because they were, like, too close to the power lines and stuff like that. But it's funny, because before I watched that documentary, like, I talked about this in the Rewind Zone video, the ending is just so ridiculous and funny. But then in the documentary, when I was watching how intricate and detailed and how much work, like, they put into just that one shot, like, makes me actually love it, like, so much more, but on a respectful level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. I think even how they set up the film, like, it sort of seems a little bit goofy at the beginning, but it really, like, it's a story about an outsider, you know, who like isn't allowed to, like, sort of participate in his family's project, and, you know, is like they put him as the door person, you know, and people just ride by him, and he doesn't get to participate in any of it.
I know, poor kid.
So he just has this dream of being a part of this. And and then it just, and, you know, he sees the sort of, like, thrill of being scared by something, and as a person that's on the outside, he thinks that I think that this is a way that he can appeal to people in some way. He'll somehow get friends. He'll somehow be a part of everything if he can sort of be a part of this thrill. And then it accidentally goes too far, right?
Yeah.
And little girl's impaled in one of the most classic scenes that looks amazing too, so well lit. And then it's so interesting then that the mask comes off, right?
Yeah.
Takes the mask off, and then the machete out of his pocket.
I know, right? Oh shit! Well, I might as well decapitate her.
yeah. But it's like the accident that leads to somehow, like this sort of this possibly having this sort of murderous conviction inside, you know, and bringing out that pathology, right? Because he is just been, like, sort of like growing inside throughout this time, this animosity towards the rest of people. But, you know, he studied them. He studied all the things he knows, like, all the things that, like, he would have to do to be a part of it, yet because of his age, and maybe it's sort of like even the curse of kind of a middle child or something like that, where you know, you see your older siblings and family doing these things, but you have to be on the outside, and you wait for your time, but it never comes. And then a horrible accident happens that goes even worse.
Yeah.
and then and then they, like, you know, and then they leave the haunted house. He never even gets to be a part of the haunted house. It's just his whole brain, his whole mind is kept at that stage, you know?
Yeah.
And that kind of, I feel like with this film, it almost challenges other slasher films, even like HauntedWeen, to have like that kind of rich premise for
Yeah.
a psycho, you know?
Yeah.
And to show exactly what happens in childhood,
Yeah.
kind of things that lead to you know, life taking completely different turns. And I mean, even watching Halloween, you're mostly left with this kind of cold feeling of not knowing. That's part of the terror. But
Mm-hmm.
like this film, I feel like I have this strange theory that even Rob Zombie's take on Halloween might have even been influenced by HauntedWeen, because of how it's set up, and especially the scene in at the end. I mean, we're kind of jumping all over the place, but maybe I'll just let you respond to this idea of like setting up sort of having this backstory for a psycho versus not. Like, what's the pros and cons of that for you, as a person that watches lots of these kind of films?
Well, it's funny. As you were talking, I was actually thinking more about Jason Voorhees than Michael Myers. And Eddie Berber, in my opinion, is actually like even more disturbed than Jason. And I'll tell you why. Because earlier you were saying that all his life, all he wanted was like validation from other people, like to get friends, to be loved. And with Jason, he was like ridiculed and berated as a child, and obviously like an accident led to his death, and his mother, who loves him dearly, obviously like took revenge. But the thing with Eddie is that like he doesn't even have his mother on his side. So it's like everybody, it's like the whole world is against him. So he's even like more depraved and like more desolate and vulnerable to these like murderous, you know, like intentions and stuff like that. And it's clearly visible towards the end of the movie when he does get the validation from the viewers, like at the show, and like when everybody's like cheering him on and they're like, yeah, kill him, and like he's actually like found like what his purpose is, because he's like finally, he's like, yes, these people like me, and you know, like I'm finally like accepted, and you know, even though it's wrong what I'm doing, like it's like it doesn't, it's like it's overclouded by his, you know, poor judgment of like what it means to be like actually like accepted, and what's the word I'm looking for, like, you know, like his brain is so construed that he finds it like so important to be accepted that he forgets that killing is wrong. You know what I mean? Whereas like Jason, on the other hand, is just seeking revenge because these people, you know, like did these things to him and his mother. You know what I mean? But it's that dire need to get that access to something that he thinks is the answer to life, but obviously it ends in doom. You know what I mean? So I feel it's almost like I feel worse for him than I do for Jason, and I feel like compared to even like Michael Myers, like there's just that mystery to Michael Myers that has never really been explained. Like I think they explained it like later in part 6, but I just stopped watching at that point. But yeah, like, yeah, I just find that he definitely showcases his desperation to be included, which has led to his own personal demise, even if he had his 5 minutes of fame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, he really doesn't have anyone because his mother didn't really help him by like sheltering him after. You know, she was just like when she sees the murder scene after, she's just like, Eddie, it's time to go, and then they're
Yeah.
gone, and they never talk about it again, and they live in the
Yeah.
middle of the woods somewhere forever, and his whole brain stays in that spot, and it just like I can't. And
He's kind of like a mix of Norman Bates and Jason Voorhees.
yeah, yeah, a little bit like that, except we don't really see the character of the mother too much. But she
Yeah, just her body
definitely
later.
resembles, like visually, the few scenes we get to see her, she definitely resembles the sort of stereotype of this sort of like repressed, controlling mom, and the effect that has on like a little boy or whatever. Equally, harboring a kind of repression and like lack of kind of development in many areas. But what was I going to say? The something about sorry, I just lost my train of thought for a second.
That's okay.
The 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 way that he sets everything up at the end in the kill room, I feel that it's like, I mean, he knows it seems like he doesn't, he's so desperate for this attention that he'll do anything. But I also think that what he's still acting out is a revenge on these on the frat boys and their girlfriends who sort of place themselves at the center of the social sphere that he feels outside of. And what makes it so apparent that it's sort of a revenge on those stereotypes is that he has the audience for it. If there was no audience, and it's sort of like we're the audience, right? We get to see this, and we generally feel empathy for the people getting murdered in these movies, at least to some degree. I mean, sometimes they try to set them up as being more stupid, and then you don't feel so bad about them dying, which is ridiculous. Yeah. But it's really a multifaceted kind of acting out of this revenge. And the second revenge is really on everybody watching. And when he sort of recreates this trauma of seeing someone die, because I think that like the accidental death is like this sort of moment of trauma that then like boils over into like another place, and sort of creates it breaks the mind. It's the point of no return, and I think that he wants to recreate that for these like this audience of like unsuspecting children and stuff. Children, right? And he was a child when he was traumatized too. So just seeing that all acted out, and then the kids realizing it's real, and then actually it's Hanks who realizes it's real, who is the one that got duped into like setting up this haunted house in the first place when Eddie comes and visits. Somehow he doesn't recognize Eddie. And we never see Eddie's face when he shows up at the frat house, and he's like, I have a haunted house for you for your party. Oh, that's And then Hanks, like the fool of the film, he's like, oh shit, this is real. And then everybody goes running. And you just know that everybody that saw that is going to be just as, at least just as messed up as he was from seeing that. So it's recreating that trauma for an audience that is not the audience in the theater, or I mean, this was straight to video, so it's only been viewed in the theater so many times. But I don't see that like multiple staging of the narrative in hardly any horror films, and especially of that time. And I think that it could have only happened during the end of the slasher era, of that particular era of it, and as a kind of reflection, on what it all transposed over that time, and this sort of, and I kind of also relate that to the history of the Grand Guignol. Again, that's like the French way of saying Grand Guignol, which was this horror theater at the like late 19th century that went into early 20th century. And the later phase of that was the thing that sort of caused the end of this horror theater was the fact that people had kind of become finally desensitized to it, and also the Holocaust had just happened, and it sort of trumped anything that had actually happened in the theater, so, which kind of led to its demise. And I feel like it's almost like it's that same kind of thing, but in a different way, that it's seeing on top of it, it's seeing beyond it, and it's presenting you something where you can look at it from the outside rather than being completely inside of it. And with the theater, how I also think it references the theater is the way that the theater initially would go back and forth between a horror play and a comedy play. And the comedy play kind of like would like kind of be the diffusion of the terror that people felt during the horror one. And I kind of feel like HauntedWeen keeps going back and forth between that. And many films do, but it's so deliberate in HauntedWeen that we get like these goofy scenes followed by the decapitations, then back to more goofiness. Like, there's so much, I hear about this film being talked about as like a no budget, like piece of trash. And there's just so much actually went into making this film, into writing this film, right? And that I don't hear get talked about. So, and you know, this is partially why I wanted to kind of have a discussion about this too.
I also admire the fact that they took the time, like most horror movies will take the time to do character development, and there's like usually excuse me, my allergies are really bad. But like usually every horror movie will take the initiative to do the character development, and there's usually like a final girl or like, you know, a character that the killer will have like empathy on or whatever. But the girlfriend, I can't remember her name. You feel so bad for her when she dies, like because it's just another thing that differentiates HauntedWeen from a lot of like other slashers, is that he actually like doesn't care, and he will kill everybody, like whether they're you know, like innocent or not innocent. And it's like this movie sets it up in a way where you think the girlfriend is gonna survive.
Absolutely.
And I don't even know if Doug did this on purpose writing the script, but then when you kill the main character like that, it really surprises you and shocks you. It's like, that's something that I do admire about the writing as well.
That's an excellent point. I mean, most films, like, they develop that, and finally there'll be like one witness at the end, or like a person who's saved or whatever, and that we almost feel like we're carried along that, and we're kind of saved at the end too. You know, we don't get decimated. But HauntedWeen is just Eddie is just completely outside of all society, and he's even outside of his relationship with his mother. You know, and when but that's the one. His mother is the one shred of things that you know kept him, you know, connected to living. And when she dies, he just doesn't care about living anymore. He only cares about extracting his revenge. And so almost where, you know, what are we left with in the end? Strangely, like we're left like to sort of empathize with Eddie. Like oddly enough, you know. And I don't think that you often see that in a way where we, especially for somebody who's so deeply nihilistic, that you know, we have a sense of the sort of tragedy of this character, and that the murder spree is also like its own, you know, suicidal spree. He's going to collapse into that at the end. But, and I have a strong sense that kill room scene really might have influenced Rob Zombie's jail scene with Michael Myers, when he's got uh, wall of masks, if you remember that. In,
Yeah, I don't really remember the Rob Zombie movies very well.
that's okay. But it struck me just because I love masks so much, and I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, you always see Michael Myers just with the Captain Kirk mask, and like, why Captain Kirk mask? Like, was it just random or whatever? Like, I mean, there's this, like, I mean, apparently he gets given it or something, but then, you know, they try to like make this whole room, you know, was covered with masks, and I just like, I mean, did they watch HauntedWeen? Because it's so similar. There's like masks
Interesting.
covering that whole room in there, and like HauntedWeen does all these things that you almost wish you would have seen in Halloween, and but you never hear that talked about with Rob Zombie. So I have no idea if that's like could have been a something, but like I know Rob Zombie collects VHS. I saw his VHS room on Cribs back in the day. Could be a HauntedWeen in there. So
You know what? I actually I'm gonna find that out for you because
yes!
I'm friends with John Five's guitar tech, so I will ask him if Rob Zombie is a HauntedWeen fan, and I will get back to you.
Yes.
But back to the masks. That's another thing that I love about this movie, which you rarely see. Like you never see this in like horror slasher genre where the killer wears not just one mask but multiple masks. Like how many does he wear throughout the movie? Like there's a lot, and I love that too. Like he doesn't just stick to one mask. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, that people were really sure that was the formula. You know, that's what would make the character iconic. But then after that, I mean, this film was made during a time in which we weren't looking for more iconic characters, right? I mean, we got Scream like a bunch of years later, and that mask like was the next iconic mask. But you don't have that to hold on to in this film. You have to like engage with the story more to understand why this person would wear masks at all. Because I mean, I feel like almost the mask subs in for the identity of the character. And you don't have to think about the identity of the character. It's hidden, right? And you sort of, it's about the shock, and then it becomes about the shock value, which is such a long tradition in horror stories, but not necessarily in this one. So I feel like we've gone over the content of the film kind of pretty good. The last sort of couple of things I wanted to touch on was about how Doug has handled this film historically in terms of copyright, and he never sold the rights to the film. Are there many other cases in which like films like this haven't sold their rights? And like, I mean, so much of these strange indie films, they get released by whatever, they have some strange other cover, totally different movie inside. Everyone's, and like, it was such a, like, I mean, they were made fairly cheaply, probably lost a lot of money on it, and then they give it up for whatever possible, exchange that they can get for it. But Doug held on to that till the day he died. Like,
do you know why?
Sorry?
Do you know why?
Well, apparently he really didn't want to see his work be co-opted by someone else, and to see what would have happened to it, because it was like, it's his singular film, it's his baby, and he's decided that he's gonna protect it for as long as he lives. And I think that was also in hopes that he would generate profits to finally pay the cast and crew and the actors of the film, because everybody volunteered their time. The only people that got paid were the sort of services that he contracted out. So he had to pay the cover artist to make a painting for it, and I love the cover art. It's beautiful painting, or even, I mean, I don't even, I'm going to look at it now. It actually, I think it's a painting.
I'd say
But
that's a painting.
yeah, but it has a very kind of also kind of sketchy illustration feel to it. He had to pay the cover artist, but he doesn't even remember her name, which
Mhm.
is funny. But he really wanted to pay people one day, and the sort of, I feel like the impetus was that this was a project that was going to, people were going to know the name Bowling Green. I never heard of this town, you know, if
Yeah,
it
we
was
have now.
a movie. And I think it was somehow protecting the town as well. Because if it would have been released by someone else, they could have just added whatever cover, and even like, I mean, the cover in itself is unlike like any horror movie I've ever seen too. I mean, if you would have sold this to another company, they probably would have, staged something where, this is an action film, but there's, some,
Yeah,
person posing on it, and like, or and it's sort, and like maybe there's be some like erotic reference, or like kind of
yeah,
like violence or whatever, to sort of dupe you into thinking that this is like another kind of typical slasher that's going to feed your appetite for more slasher
yeah.
films. But I really feel people get something else when they rent it, and that's part of why it's so legendary, is that you rent it and it's just this strange film that like works on all these different levels. But to go back to it, like, I mean, I feel like more people retain copyright today over their films and self-release them. Um, but like, I mean, like, how do you think that this contributed to its legacy or not? I mean, based on other films that you've seen that maybe were taken in totally different ways in terms of their promotion.
Well, the thing with being a VHS collector is that the more rare it is, like the more sought out it is. I'm actually kind of curious if he did have any offers from any distribution companies to release it, especially after the Red Letter Media episode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when I think it aired like a couple years ago, but definitely before he passed away. But I'm always curious about that. But the fact that collectors and like diehard fans know these things uh, kind of makes it more authentic and special in a way.
It really does.
Because
Yeah.
we were talking about this like before we started recording. Emeritus, the Hamilton VHS distribution
Americans,
company.
yeah.
And I have a movie that was an Emeritus. It is an Emeritus movie, but I have the re-release one, so it's not like the actual Emeritus. But I was on a Facebook like fire sale one day, and it came up, and it was the Emeritus one, and it was a lot of money that I was like, obviously it's worth it, but I just didn't want to spend that much. But these are the things that collectors who are passionate about like the authenticity that like makes it special for us. So whatever reasons Doug had for not reprinting it, maybe he was just kind of embarrassed, maybe he wanted to salvage the reputation of the town, Green Bowling, but whatever his reasons were, I could never hate him for it, you know what I mean? Because in a way, like it just, me and you, we have our copies, like it makes it that much more special to me, you know what I mean? Like even still, like there's a lot like 555, there's so many movies that got like re-releases later, and like even like the big Wizard boxes, like I have a couple of those, but those are cool because the actual slip is the original, but the tapes are like remade. But even like the one Wizard box that I do have is like an authentic one, like from the 80s, the Beast. It's still
nice.
I love that movie. But yeah, like, yeah, right? Like I love claymation beasts and stuff like that. But yeah, like it's just I don't know, it appeals to the collectors that understand the passions that went through making these movies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, I know a lot of horror movie lovers who, you know, they'll buy all the Blu-ray ones, like, because they prefer to watch it in 4K and stuff like that. So I guess it's whatever your niche is. But me personally, I just I like to have original. Like, I mean, I don't only own original stuff, but it's more magical and special to me as I'm watching it, because it just renders those, you know, nostalgic moods that put you in a good mood. Those neurotransmitters are releasing dopamine, you know what I mean? And like, even when you're holding on to these things, like the first day that when I opened this, you know what I mean? Like, my hands on it, like touching it, like, makes it that much more special. So, I think the rarity and the fact that it was never redistributed and manufactured like multiple times or whatever, like, just makes it that much more unique.
Yeah. Sorry, but it probably would have come out a bunch more times, and it would have been then sold to somebody else, and then new.
And that's fine. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And like, as long as like other people. Yeah, and like, it's like, I don't like have anything against that. Many more people probably would watch the movie had it have, you know, like, another release. You know, like, let's just say if it's not on YouTube, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's one more thing that adds to the bond that people like us share. Like, we're sitting here and we're talking about this movie, you know what I mean? How many other people out there are doing that, you know? So like, we're just sharing the reasons why some of these movies that are not talked about a lot, so that people can understand like why they're good and why they should watch them.
Absolutely. That was an excellent answer. I think that you really hit on something there with the appeal of the authenticity of the objects, that the HauntedWeen object itself. And I think Doug had a sense of that. It's a very good point, I think, because like so to just follow up on a few things you said, so he was looking for a distributor for the film, I read, and he got a few offers, but nobody was interested in giving him money up front for anything. So there was no guarantees in a way, and it was sort of tricky business back then too. And I think he learned that in Hollywood when he went there, and was sort of disappointed by the authenticity of people there. And he had to return to his hometown to make this to work. Like, so many people on the film are from the school that he went to, right? And the school lent him all the equipment. And
the people.
That's why they had any of that stuff in the first place. But a lot of people have copies of HauntedWeen right now, because nearing the end of his life, he let the last copies go. And on his Facebook, if you were watching his posts from the HauntedWeen Facebook page, that's where he was selling them. And people were getting mint copies of this movie, which is like, whoa, holy Christ, like an actual mint copy of this. But which is great. I mean, but I really am happy that I actually got a rental copy, because I know that this is one of 2,000 copies he sold in 1991
That's cool.
At a convention at a conference for like company, like video distributors, and it's like been through, and like this was actually like one of the copies that traveled to Saskatchewan. So this is maybe like the only copy that even existed in Saskatchewan.
That's so fun.
2,000 copies seems like a lot, but when you spread them out, you know, then it's very scarce, you know.
That also makes me think of like, I'm a huge nerd, and I love the stickers that come on on the actual tape, like the rental stickers, because like I like to imagine, like, like when I look at a VHS, I'm just like, oh, it's like a video mom and pop shop from like Nebraska or something like
Yeah,
that. And like, I like to
I love
imagine
those.
like the story of like what this tape went through to
Yeah.
magically come into my hands in like London, Ontario. You know what I mean?
Oh, they contain such stories. I love that too. I mean, that's a huge
Yeah.
group of VHS collecting, I think, and a lot of people love the old stickers. I always want to know, like what, especially when other like collectors find stuff within province, especially like weird tapes. I always want to know like what sticker, what store did it come from? Because that's like
Yeah.
mostly a history that's like completely lost now.
Yeah.
There are video rentals like popping up in so many different places, and there isn't anything like that now at all. But
No, even like books.
of
Like, remember like library cards and books?
course,
That
yeah,
used to be like in
yes,
envelopes and
yeah,
stuff. Like, and we
yeah.
used to like see the names
Mhm,
that read them. Like,
mhm.
it's just stuff like that that just warms my heart.
Oh my God, yeah. I get discarded library books often, and I just love seeing the cards inside. Um, and
Awesome.
like especially when people make notes in books too. The funny another funny thing about tapes is when they finally do get sold, especially to like this often happens in senior homes. People write their names on the tapes. So I have all these tapes that
Yes.
have people's
Wow.
names on them, and it's like, and it's funny. Like I mean, it immediately my first thought is like, oh, they wrecked the art, but then I'm like, oh, I love the history that's attached to
Yeah, I
it.
know. Yeah.
Um, I think that's a pretty good response to like why I decided to keep it DIY from the start to finish and remain true
Yeah.
to that. And that's why HauntedWeen the tapes, even if they had that shitty DVD release that did contain the awesome documentary, but with the horrible cover art, the tapes just it only amplified the value of them. And now the DVD sold out too. And as I said before, you can find a copy of it for like $400, as you can find
Wow.
a copy of the tape for $400 on Amazon right now, the singular
Yeah.
copy on there. There's probably a newer one too, one of the ones that got bought later. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, I try to always talk about this with the screenings to sort of just communicate like how rare these objects are, and just how much work goes into these objects finding their homes when they do. Um, I mean, film today is just like something that you just click on Netflix or whatever, and so many
Yeah.
people don't have the a feeling for like the sort of journeys that rare films take to get to their audiences and to the people that appreciate them. It's
Yeah.
just so different, and like I mean, I put like there's tapes I've put like 10 to 15 years of work trying to find them. It's so different from like a single click, online. And it's cool that like you can go on Tubi or Prime or whatever Shutter or whatever, and see a lot of these like films in our collections now. I'm
Yeah.
I'm glad that more people get to see them, but they'll never know how much work people got put into getting those films, like before and even now. Um, but okay, I'm just gonna think of one last question here. Um, so, sorry, just one moment.
No problem.
Yeah, actually, just one last question about like how you. So we've just kind of discussed how this film um, subverts some of the expectations that audiences would have with these kind of films. Do you see any of that taking place within what we watched in the documentary or the film itself with the actors and crew? In a way, do you see any different kind of ways that they work together that also sort of subverted some of the roles that you'd often see in filmmaking industry? I'm not sure if
Um,
I do. But like, I'm wondering if you got any of that from the documentary, especially.
Yes, I did. And the difference between movies now and back then that I was aware of before I watched the documentary, but just watching the documentary made me like remember that a lot of these like low budget independent movies that were made back then, a lot of the actors were crew people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I really
That's a
love as
beauty on
well.
almost everybody. Yeah.
Right? Like it's just like even I think Doug is even an actor in it. Like he plays one of the frat guys, and a lot of the actors, like I'm pretty sure, who was it? Like not the DP, but the stunt guy who drives the van as Eddie at the end of the movie. Like he helped build a bunch of the stuff on set. I think it was like Hanks is his name, like the goofy guy.
Yeah.
Hanks was the I want to say he was the art director. Like I can't remember what he was, but it's just so funny that like they all started out with a job at the beginning of the production, but
Yeah.
then like throughout the production, they ended up like just like molding into other jobs, including being actors as well. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I definitely absorbed from watching the documentary was remembering that special thing about these low budget movies is like most of those aren't actors and they're actually crew people.
I think that speaks to kind of a gigantic labor of love more than exploitation. But like it's verging on that, but no one's getting paid for this movie anyways. It was such hard work, but everybody seems to look back on it so fondly. You know,
Yeah.
like that, like Doug talks about it in a way. He was like, that was literally the best experience of my entire life. And like people look back on it, and like I mean, some of them went on to do other things, but for so many people, it was such this like singular, unique experience. Um, the only thing that I don't see it quite playing with enough is I don't see many of the female people on the cast or crew taking up as creative roles as a lot of the men in the film. I see there's a bunch of women working on the crew, but they're mostly like the assistant, the second director. Like they're more seem to have like if you kind of were to go around the spectrum of personalities, you'd see them sort of working heavily at the sensing end instead of the intuitive end, and not making the creative decisions necessarily at the intuitive end, but having to sort of be editors and keeping track of things, making sure the dudes do their jobs and they don't miss details.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always hoping to see more done in that area in films when I'm researching them, and especially from this period. It's rare to see, but still, like, I hope for their, circumstances that don't always play out in the same way. Like, I mean, you can have entire crews that you won't even, it's all dudes, not even a single non-dude on it. But when I was watching the documentary, I was kind of carefully looking for that to see, because the film plays with the trope so much of the genre, but I mean, at the same time, I read reviews of it where some person wrote that they were so impressed that the lead actress got naked, and like that never happened. She was too hot, and it's just, so in that way, like it reproduces some of the tropes instead of challenging them, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know. What did you see on the? How did you see any of that? Did you notice some of the sort of differentiation of roles like that in the film, or do you think it was more like the creativity was shared?
Well, watching the documentary made me think that the creativity was shared because there was that one female that pretty much like was the assistant first director, and like she did a lot of stuff. And I'd like to respond to like the tropes of the 80s like slashers with something that I actually really, really admire about this movie. Um, I actually totally love Doug for this.
Mm-hmm.
The boat scene with the people like on the boat on the lake, and every horror movie, a naked girl is always slim and thin, and he cast a bigger girl, and she's fully like embracing her body, and she's like naked and partying, and she's not thin, she's not skinny, and that was like one of the things that I noticed immediately when I watched this movie, that I was like, oh my god, one of the naked girls is like a bigger girl, and I think that that goes against like almost like all of the 80s like slasher type rules
Yeah.
of like the babes. I mean, like, I don't knock on thin naked ladies. Like, I think all women are beautiful. I think the naked female body is gorgeous, but let's be honest, in all 80s horror movies, they're all like super thin and fit skinny girls, and I love that that one girl, it was like a heavier woman and got naked, and I was just like, yeah, girl,
Yes.
show it off.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I also noticed that too, but I sort of wanted you to bring that up rather than me. I really noticed that too. It's so strange at the beginning. There's that scene where like you sort of have the chubby guy getting drunk or whatever, and then they set it up like it's going to almost, there's going to be like maybe like 80s jokes or sorry, 80s films are so like have so many fat jokes constantly. So I expected almost the film to continue on in this way, because it makes a joke at the beginning where this guy gets drunk and he sees this same woman as like a skinny girl, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to like bear through like a movie of more like stupid fat jokes, and then they never make another one. So it almost like they keep setting up these expectations and then breaking them down, never revealing something else. They never make a single other joke about that in the movie, and they put her like in the boat scene. She's right up front, and she's just like bam, and yes, oh my god, like that was
It's amazing.
And then she continues to have awesome scenes throughout the entire film. She paints Hank's foot like toenails, like weird, like, you know, this almost gender bendery just a little bit, and Hanks is just like, sweet, I don't care, I'm drinking.
Yeah, it's great.
And so I really did notice that, and I've never heard anyone talk about that either. So and I also feel that why I feel like, I mean, I okay about showing this in the theater too without having a rating or whatever, is that the nudity in the film is not like, it's not sexualized in a way. It's just there, you know.
Yeah.
And they're just having fun on a boat. It's all it is.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So I'm really glad you pointed that out. I think, and that might speak to the sort of shared creativity that goes around in the film. But I mean, there's definitely like a group of women that are making sure the job gets done in this film.
Yeah.
And so much respect to them, because I think that they contribute a hell of a lot to this movie existing at all. I mean, in the end, it's like Doug's kind of perseverance. But I mean, good things like often don't happen when you have such a limited range of people. And I'm going to touch on this in my next screening with Spookies, which is going to be controversial maybe a little bit. But often an all-male like crew, just like they'll start arguing about things, and things just they have no idea of like working things out, because they're too enraged, and they just get over their mutual toxicity. And but you see like that, you don't see that on the documentary, you don't see that on the film. I think things are still like, I mean, still kind of evolving in a way where jobs, the whole like kind of structure of jobs within the film industry was going was about to go under like a huge transformation. But this, I think it was pushing towards that transformation still, instead of reproducing like you know, the same stuff that always happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that's good. This is probably chatting for about an hour. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'd like to add.
No, please do. Yeah.
I want to say that I love the art director
Yeah.
for The Kill Room.
Yes.
All of those posters and like cardboard stands, like the pumpkin head cardboard stand, like what I wouldn't give to have that, but especially the one poster that is seriously just makes me love the art director so much. The fact that he had a Graveyard Shift poster, and I'm not talking about the Stephen King Graveyard Shift. I'm talking about the Canadian vampire movie, Graveyard Shift. And I was so blown away the first time that I watched HauntedWeen that I saw that poster in the movie, because I actually seriously thought that no American ever saw or even heard of those two movies. And it is the sequel, the poster that they have, it's like the part 2 on the wall. But I just wanted to say, like, I don't even know if the art director's still alive. If you're watching this, thank you for including that, because I love that movie. I just love it. And obviously we're Canadian. We're huge advocates of Canadian horror. And the fact that that is in the movie is just fabulous.
That's excellent point. Yeah, there's so many awesome posters in there. And it's like the way that the decision to put that in really is a nod to like other independent films, and you know, and almost knowing that this film's going to be rare and obscure and cult, and I started to nod to other films within that take up that space too. I also love the Demon War poster in one of the scenes, or in the office in the documentary. That was awesome. There's all the paraphernalia that the art director put into the Kill Room scene is just amazing, and it really speaks to the time that these things could have been available to be used in a film. Now they're totally obsolete. You know,
don't you wish you had a time machine?
Oh, I thought that so many times. Yeah, except I might step on a butterfly, and then who knows what happens.
Oh, that's right, like in The Simpsons.
So yeah, excellent point. Those would be great films to screen as well. Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah. Well, thank you very much again, Yasmina, for having this conversation. I hope this helps people really develop more appreciation for what is, you know, an incredible passion project. I use that term a lot for like many of the films that I screen, but I think like, it's really important to have these conversations among people that do write for things, that do blog about things, and you know, not, and of course, like all praise to the collectors too, but these kind of conversations have to be had among people that are, you know, working in these scenes, and to like elevate these films to a level in which we can appreciate them beyond the sort of like B-movie schlock that is the sort of lens in which these kind of films get talked about so often. And that's really been my whole like kind of, that's been my whole motivation ever since like releasing films and everything, as to help expand the perception.
I'm with you. I'm definitely, that's like exactly why I do what I do, like the podcast and the blog. It's so I can share these movies with those who have never heard of them, and also so that they don't fade away in time. You know what I mean? Like they should be remembered.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and thanks for everyone for watching.
Yes, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you RPL Theatre, and we'll do this again another time.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
My pleasure. Thank you
Awesome.
again as well. Okay, you have a
Have a
good
good
night.
night.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
I'm